I can't tell if my audio is on. Is my audio on?
Yes.
It is.
Oh.
Yep.
Thank you. I got my iPad today.
Linda, I have the presentation ready if you want me to share screen. I can do it on my end.
Mr. Chair, we're live streaming now. Go ahead. To you, Mr. Chair, go ahead. We're live streaming.
That's you, Alex.
That's me? Oh, I'm to call the meeting to order? Oh, my goodness. All right. My apologies. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Richmond Hill. We're here this evening to review how we're going to handle future meetings. So I'm not sure, but I'm going to turn it back over to our Secretary Treasurer for whatever we need to do to kick this meeting off.
To you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I'll just read our preamble and then we will continue on in our normal meeting fashion.
Okay.
Okay. Today's Committee of Adjustment meeting is hereby held as an electronic meeting in response to the COVID-19 emergency. The COVID-19 emergency pertains to the emergency declared by the Province of Ontario pursuant to Order in Council 518-2020, Ontario Regulation 5020 on March 17th, 2020, and by the City of Richmond Hill on March 20th, 2020, under the provisions of Section 701 and Section 401 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. The Committee of Adjustment is authorized to hold this meeting electronically as a tribunal under the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act, in accordance with Hearings in Tribunal Proceedings Temporary Measures Act. The Committee of Adjustment for the City of Richmond Hill has been appointed by Council to consider applications for minor variance and consent in accordance with the Planning Act. The committee's decision may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. All appeals and associated fees must be filed directly with the Secretary Treasurer in accordance with the Planning Act. To be notified of an Ontario Land Tribunal hearing, you must request a copy of the committee in writing. Written comments, the public may submit written correspondence regarding agenda matters by email to committeeofadjustment@richmondhill.ca. All written correspondence received by 4:30 p.m. has been provided to committee members electronically. Electronic delegations, delegates are reminded to please mute your microphone or phone and turn off your video until it is your turn to speak. Please make sure your microphone is not muted when you begin speaking. Members do not have questions, or after all questions have been asked, your delegation is over. Please sign off of Zoom or hang up the phone once the committee has made a decision, and you can watch the rest of the meeting on our live stream.
Our Secretary Treasurer is Mrs. Jamie Hope Herman. Our Assistant Secretary Treasurer is Ms. Linda Asikas. And joining us this evening is Mr. Gus Galanis. I'm assuming that we have no conflicts of interest this evening, gentlemen. I see none, in which case, and I'm assuming that the agenda item is one single report this evening. So I can call that report to be presented by Mr. Galanis.
Good evening, committee. Just going to do a brief presentation here to do an overview of the staff report that's before the committee this evening. Just wait for that to pop up. Okay, so just quickly, presentation overview. We're just going to quickly go over the purpose of the report that's before the committee this evening. Brief update on the current status of the provincial and City of Richmond Hill COVID-19 emergency declarations. I'll provide an overview of the current method of holding Committee of Adjustment meetings, which obviously you're very well aware of, and an overview of the direction that we've received from Council as of March 9th, 2022 on the holding of electronic meetings. And lastly, we'll go over the recommendations in the report, and I'll just make the meeting open to any questions that you may have. Next slide, please, Linda. So the purpose of the report is to seek direction from the committee with respect to the format it wishes to utilize in the holding of Committee of Adjustment meetings, both in the interim before the COVID-19 emergency is declared over and after April 29th, 2022. So as a result of the provincial and city COVID-19 emergency declarations that came into effect in March of 2020, the last time I was here, coincidentally, the City Council approved a protocol for the holding of electronic council and committee meetings. Next slide, Linda. So as a result, on May 20th, May 20th, 2020, this committee adopted procedures for holding electronic meetings and directed the Secretary Treasurer to facilitate electronic delegations and submissions for such meetings. And as you're all aware, electronic Committee of Adjustment meetings have been held successfully for the last 2 years. However, as a result of the direction from the province to end its COVID-19 emergency declaration in March of this year, Council had to make some decisions concerning the format of future Council and committee meetings. Next slide, please. So at its meeting on March 9th, 2022, amongst other matters, Council directed that committees of Council only be permitted to hold either electronic or in-person meetings following the end of the COVID-19 emergency. Hybrid meetings are not to be permitted. So as a result of that direction, the fact that the province has already ended its COVID-19 declaration and the city will be ending its emergency declaration in the very near future, direction is required from this committee on how Committee of Adjustment meetings are to be held in the future. Next slide. So recognizing that only the city's COVID-19 emergency is still in effect, so we're still under the Temporary Measures Act. So with respect to future meetings to be held in the interim period, and there's only really one meeting, it's the April 8th meeting, the staff report is recommending that the existing procedures for holding electronic meetings continue to apply until April the 29th, which is the day after the next meeting, and that the Secretary Treasurer continue to be authorized to facilitate electronic delegations and submissions as they have been doing for the last 2 years. So this will allow the April 28th meeting, Committee of Adjustment meeting, to take place as scheduled as an electronic meeting. Next slide, please. However, direction is also required as to how the committee will hold its meetings following that date. So in accordance with the direction from Council, the committee has 2 options. One, to maintain the existing format of electronic meetings on a go-forward basis. This option would require the adoption of new electronic meeting procedures for considerations after April the 29th, 2022, or alternatively, to return to in-person meetings as of May 26, 2022, which is the meeting following the April meeting, in accordance with the committee's pre-COVID-19 emergency practices. Next slide. So after having careful regard for both options and the fact that all COVID-19 emergency restrictions are going to end sometime in the very near term, likely before the end of April of this year, it's recommended that the Committee of Adjustment return to in-person meetings as of May 26, 2022. This format would allow staff to conduct future meetings in accordance with the committee's previous practices and notice requirements. And it would also afford applicants and the public to participate in meetings in accordance with the established provisions for Committee of Adjustment meetings in keeping with the Planning Act. So in conclusion, staff is recommending that the committee adopt the recommendations as outlined in the staff report as it relates to the holding of electronic meetings until April the 29th, the interim period, and following that the committee return to in-person meetings as of May 26, 2022. And that concludes the presentation. And I'm here to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments, questions, or concerns, gentlemen? Yes, Mr. Gossi. I think you're muted. There you go.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Galanis. I'm personally of the opinion that I would like to push it out a little bit further. And then I suppose my question, I would like to extend our online meetings further. The day would be TBD at this point until such time that I believe that the COVID case count, the official, well, not the official case count, I guess it would be the anecdotal case count, would be reduced. So what would we do? I guess we would just, in the case that I were to make a motion to do that, would we do that for a certain period of time and then reevaluate it and have another vote in the future? Is that the way it would work?
So before I answer the end of the question, through you, Mr. Chair, the option to do that, unfortunately, is not there. And I want to clarify this. There's a risk in following that, because it's not only the city's emergency that potentially could end once the declaration is over. That'll take the authority away from this committee to hold electronic meetings. So we know that is going to end likely at the end of April. The second part of it is under the Temporary Measures Act, which gives the authority to the committee to hold electronic meetings. We don't know when that will end. That could end at the end of April. It could end a couple of weeks after that. And the risk of following an extended period of electronic meetings is that, for example, if we go to the May meeting and the province takes away the temporary act, that meeting will become null and void, and we would have to reschedule it. And that's the difficulty of sort of picking a TBD option. So that's the information that I could provide at this point, and that's why we've been kind of put in a situation where it has to be an either-or option. So picking the TBD option puts at risk any future meetings, long story short.
Thank you. I would have a question before I go. Sorry, Mr. Master, I'll let you in a second. My question is, what is council doing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Council has chosen for itself to operate in a hybrid capacity in the interim until they can make a further decision, much as Member Gossi had outlined, but they did not give that option to committees. That's the direction that they've given.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Master.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have concerns about the infection, which is far more infectious with the new variants, based on the news I've read. And I'm not so much concerned about us because we sit away from the public and the requirement of not wearing masks. But I have noticed in over 12 years of being on the committee that a lot of seniors come to the meeting. And I would therefore want to remain on Zoom. It has worked well, and I don't see why it wouldn't continue to work well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duretzi.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would be in favor of allowing this procedure to remain in place for a short duration. We really don't know if we're going to be looking at more lockdowns, whether or not the virus, continues to multiply or get worse, but we could be right back in the same situation that we were in. So rather than to risk going to in-person meetings and then find ourselves 2, 3 months, 6 months, even 12 months back in this same position, why not just ride it out for another 3 months, 6 months, and we put a date on this condition that this, we'll have another meeting, 3 months down the road. That would be my recommendation. That's where I'm at.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Gandhi.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Galanis, you had mentioned about some different electronic methods that will be used. Could you elaborate on that? And I tend to agree with my colleagues on council, on the committee rather, that I would prefer for it to be done the way we're doing it now. It is working. Yes, that public interaction is definitely not there, but from a health and safety perspective, with things changing relatively pretty quickly over the last month, I would feel more comfortable in the environment that we're in. So maybe if you could just elaborate on the electronic system you said that will be changing.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't anticipate that the methodology would change in terms of holding these meetings. It would be similar. It's just that we would have to reaffirm it through a different act. Right now, it's under the Temporary Powers Act. We would have to reaffirm a meeting protocol through the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act, which gives us a committee the authority to hold electronic meetings if it chooses so. We would just have to come up with a different protocol, and we would have to come back to you to put that into play before that May meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify, Mr. Chair, the difference though is that once you choose that electronic path, the city solicitor's office is telling us that it will be in effect permanent. That is the difficulty. And it's not just a matter of pulling back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That would be permanent until we're done, which would be probably somewhere around December the 8th of this year. And then you would be looking at appointing a new committee for 2023 after the election. Is that not correct?
Again, I'm not the city solicitor. I assume that there would be an opportunity to review at some point in the future. Yes, correct.
Okay, so I might sound a little hypocritical because I have every intention of going to the ball game this weekend, but that's a choice that I can make, and I'm making that for myself. I'm a little uncomfortable with the notion that once we decided to go in-house, in-person meetings, that we don't get to flip around or to change our mind. We're stuck with it till the end of our term. So it certainly would be my opinion that we would stay with the electronic meetings that we have until the end of our term. That would be my opinion. Mr. Gossi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Galanis, with all due respect, I'm just trying to be very careful about my word selection here. I'm not quite clear as to why the solicitor would say it would be permanent. It doesn't make sense to me why it would be permanent. I understand that may have been communicated, but it just sounds unreasonable that anything would be permanent, to be honest with you, right? It seems reasonable to me that at some point in time in the future, we would make the decision to attend the city council chambers and resume the in-person meetings because the wastewater treatment numbers are coming back saying that the numbers are low. People were allowed to take PCR tests are now coming back and it's been verified that the numbers are extremely low. And then at that point in time, I think I would feel comfortable with it. I just am having some difficulty with the notion of it being permanent as it may be. And I appreciate our chairman's point about if at the end of December, we would appoint new representatives to the council. I mean, perhaps, but it all kind of seems a little bit wishy-washy in the sense that we don't know if it would be till December. It doesn't make sense why it would be permanent. So if we could get some clarification on that, that would be great. Sorry, I was trying to maybe say that in as much of a diplomatic way as I could. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a fair comment. If it, I am in the hands of, staff is in the hands of the committee. If your choice is to proceed in an electronic format, we will proceed in that manner and get you the information that you require in order to make that decision before the May 26th meeting. If you make that choice, we're good to go for the April 28th meeting, which is very important. We don't want to cancel that meeting. Notice is going out for that meeting this coming Wednesday. It's very important to get direction on that. And then the future meetings, if this committee chooses to go electronic, we will come back before that May 26th date to seek your direction on how to do it and to provide you with the additional information.
Would it be appropriate for me to be requesting a motion at this time for us? Okay. And
Okay,
that case,
Perhaps before the motion, through you, Mr. Chair, can I just make?
yes,
one comment?
go ahead, Mr. Master.
Yes. So if I understand correctly from Mr. Galanis, this particular meeting today will only be voting for one single meeting on 28th of April, and we'll meet again? No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the way that the recommendation is structured, it breaks it into two different parts in essence. One has to do with the interim situation.
Right.
Till April the 29th, and the second option is how to proceed following that.
Thank you. No, that's what I understood. Okay, but then I got confused with the follow-up discussion.
Well, now I'm confused because I thought the April 28th meeting was fait accompli. I thought that it was a continuation of what we were already doing because we were covered by the existing legislation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is the possibility that that legislation could be taken away and the city's declaration of an emergency comes into effect, which would then put that meeting in jeopardy. That's why we're asking you to reaffirm it today to make sure we have an electronic meeting for the 28th.
So do I need two motions or do I need one motion from this date forward that we would carry on with our current practice?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion that you would put forward is in keeping with the recommendation in the staff report. If I could be so bold as to suggest to the committee, you would, in the second part of that, you would just make a choice to go in an electronic format and make it very clear that that's what you want to do, and that then we would come back. That doesn't need to be in the actual recommendation, but I leave it up to yourself on how you want to structure that.
Mr. Gandhi.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try and do the motion. I move that we continue to have our Committee of Adjustment meetings via electronic format for not only the meeting of April the 28th, but also all meetings moving forward until the end of the term for this committee.
Moved by Member Gandhi, seconded by Member Master. All in favor? I see 5 hands. It's approved. Thank you very much. Okay, we're all set then? I can ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Hey,
Or
Mr.
do we
Chair,
have
you
one
sure
more?
can.
Okay, well, I think we know who's going to make that motion.
I think there's the,
Mr. Chair,
Moved
I
by Member
hereby move
Master. Moved by Member
adjourn this
Master,
meeting.
seconded by Member Duretzi. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very